Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a new Democratic governor and a larger Republican majority in the state legislature. We'll get reaction from a Democratic lawmaker from the mid-state region and a reaction from the state's business community. Let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, welcome back to the program. Well, as everybody knows, Tom Wolf was a pretty substantial winner in last week's election, midterm election, governor's election. He won by 10 percentage points, but the Republicans actually picked up seats in both the House and the Senate. We're going to get a reaction. We have a mid-state lawmaker, State Senator Rob Teplitz is joining me. He's a Democrat. Then we'll get the reaction from the business community. Actually, looking forward, I think rather than looking backward, Senator, we ought to look a little forward because obviously there's going to be huge challenges ahead, and I'm sure you're looking forward to it. He gets no special treatment because he's a Franklin and Marshall College alum, right? No special treatment.
That's right.
All right, but seriously, look, larger majority. Governor-elect Tom Wolf has a fairly aggressive agenda. I think you would agree there. Mm-hmm. What are you looking forward to? Go through two or three things that you think are doable, knowing the situation in the legislature.
Well, I think there's a consensus that we need to renew our commitment to investing in public education. The governor-elect has made that a centerpiece of his campaign, but even among my colleagues in the Senate, and I believe in the House, there's a realization that we need to get back to that. I think that will be a prime focus of the next budget. We need to do that. We need to invest in economic development and job creation, which was another priority during the campaign. I think those two things are broad consensus areas.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that here's the dilemma. Now, you've been in the legislature. You understand this better than I do. A $2 billion structural deficit, right? $2 billion. That has to be dealt with. Revenues are up slightly. So Governor-elect Tom Wolf says, well, we're going to spend more on education. We're going to spend more on community and economic development. All the, how those priorities work out, who knows? How's this going to be done fiscally?
Well, that's the challenge. I mean, in the last year's budget, the 14-15 budget, the Republicans used all sorts of one-time tricks and revenue transfers and gimmicks and all of that, but it's been exhausted. We're really starting with a deeper hole in the next budget. I think there's going to need to be a mix of new revenues and other ways to save money, and I hope that we can find a way to get there. Now,
as you know, you don't have a lot of flexibility in the budget. I mean, when you go through the budget line items and you get things like $5 billion on education, almost $2 billion on prisons. You get health and human services. You get the debt for the pensions, $2 billion. I mean, all of a sudden, Senator, you're out of maneuvering room, aren't you?
That's true.
How big a challenge is that alone, just trying to...
I think that is a challenge. There isn't a lot of discretionary spending. I think the tragedy over the last few years has been the failure to invest in our state in a way that would grow our revenues naturally. If we have more people working, if there are new businesses being created, that will bring more money into the state. And so that's where we need to invest in our own economic development and job creation. And the governor-elect made that a priority, and I think that's a shared priority.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, one of the ways that it's possible to raise money, well, there are two ways that have been talked about during the campaign. One is the shale tax. We'll hear from folks, Gene Barr and Fred Anton, our regular business panel in a few minutes about that. Obviously, they have a different view of that. But the governor-elect has talked a lot about that. What do you think? And I've speculated that Republicans in the eastern part of the state, senators, might be for it. You think there's a chance that would get through the Senate?
Yeah, I think the votes are there in the Senate to get to a Marcellus Shale Tax at a reasonable level. We don't want to be the highest in the country, but at a reasonable level. The real block has been Governor Corbett. It hasn't been in the state Senate.
Yeah, but the House, I'll get some House members on, as you know, more conservative, a little more difficult at that. All right, we're going to run for a break. When we come back, I want to talk about a couple other things, shift away, medical marijuana, what's going to happen with kind of get the sense of reform that I know something you've been talking about, one of the things you've been invested in. All right, we're talking with State Senator Rob Teplitz. We're dealing with the new Governor-elect Tom Corbett's agenda. We'll do that. And Governor, did I just say, yeah, I think I better get it right. That's hard to say. Governor Wolf, it's new. Governor Tom Wolf. We'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
We're back now. If only the host could get the name right of the new governor of the state. We have two Toms and we have a Rob here, right? We got to get this all straight. It's been a tough week for all of us. All right. Look, let's talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about Medicaid and I want to talk about medical marijuana. Let's start with medical marijuana. Passed the House 43 to Senate 43 to 7, overwhelming. Goes to the Senate. It's 80% of the voters' favorite. Conservative, Republican, liberal, Democrat on board. What? And I think the governor-elect would sign it. Yeah,
I think
he said so. He said, yeah, he said he's for it. Go ahead.
I think the biggest obstacle on that, and on many other issues, has been Governor Corbett. We in the Senate, Republican, Democrats, I think there's consensus on doing things like that. But the Senate Republicans were burdened by Governor Corbett's positions and not wanting to embarrass him on certain issues like this one. We were still able to get it out of the Senate. Over in the House, I think the House wants to have its opportunity for hearings and studying the issue, but with leadership of a governor on the issue, I think that will make a tremendous difference.
So you think that if everybody gets more invested in having a conversation, there's not this sort of polarization that we've seen. I mean, let's be honest, the House and the Senate have not functioned very well lately. I mean, senators have come from different backgrounds, different parts of the state. That creates a certain amount of tension that's not been easy to work through. You know that as well as I do. I think more partisanship in the House than the Senate. I mean, we're not telling tales out of school here. We're just being candid. Yeah. You think that some of that can be overcome. You're optimistic. I can get the sense that you are.
I think so. I mean, good Lord, if there's one thing we should be able to agree to, it's getting medicine to sick kids. Yeah. And so I think with leadership of a governor, we should be able to do that. Yeah.
Let's talk about Medicaid expansion. Governor-elect Wolf is on record saying he will end Healthy Pennsylvania and go to a traditional Medicaid program. As I understand it, he can't do that for 6 months, that it's locked in place. The Senate sent a traditional Medicaid expansion over bipartisan. You had these caveats in it that didn't look like much caveat, not a lot of soup there. I mean, I think that could be massaged. How's that going to, 600,000 people could be in the process of using the federal exchange and that's going to get complicated, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, the traditional Medicaid expansion would be our preference, Senate Democrats' preference over the governor's Healthy PA plan. It's an important transition that would need to take place. We need to make sure that if the new administration is going to make that transition, that no one who's getting the benefit under Healthy PA loses their health insurance that they now have for the first time. But we need to move in that direction. I think it saves more money, it creates more jobs, it's more fair to the people who would get that insurance, but we need to do it in a responsible way.
All right, so before I get to the Reform Caucus and just a couple of things you'd like to see accomplished, we didn't talk about the other tax. I mean, the governor-elect says, look, let's do a progressive income tax. Depending how it does, it may need a constitutional amendment. Depending how it's, as I said, it's done, maybe not. That's tough. I mean, you need revenue, but I don't give that much of a chance. Does that even have a prayer in the Senate?
Well, I think we'll need to see the details. All of us should be open-minded to what the new administration is proposing, but the devil is going to be in the details. Yeah. It is tough to make a constitutional change. I think what we need to focus on is what area of consensus can we get to get through a very tough budget year.
All right, give me now. Look, you've been pushing a lot of reforms, and a lot of voters in this state want them. Give me two that you want to see enacted. If you have your own way, what would you do?
Sure. The Government Reform Caucus has been pushing a limitation on gifts to elected officials and greater disclosure. We were able to get through a House committee this past session. We want to keep moving forward on that. And the second is redistricting reform, which is my personal priority. I think you saw the effects of gerrymandering on this year's elections, and it's not really right. The voters should be picking their legislators, not the other way around.
All right. Well, look, thanks for coming in. We'll have you back as we get through this process. It's going to be a kind of crazy year. It's going to be tough, grueling, and hopefully a little fun thrown in. Thanks for coming in. All right. We're going to hear from our all-star business panel. We'll get the reaction of the business community to the recent elections in the state. But looking forward, what's the business agenda as we move into 2015?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back. Well, we now have our all-star business panel, Gene Barr. He's president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the chamber guy, as he always called himself. Remember that? You used to run around.
I did.
You still do, don't you?
Yeah, once in a while. Why not?
Why not? Yeah. And Fred Anton, he's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, two of our regular panelists. All right, Gene, let me start with you. Republicans pick up seats in the House. 8 more than they had before, in the Senate 3 more.
Correct.
Huge majorities.
It is.
Democratic governor. Where do you think that all goes?
Well, it'd be very interesting. I mean, we've already seen what Governor-elect Wolf has said, what he wants to do. Clearly, severance was on there. Personal income tax has been discussed, more funding, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see a huge appetite for a personal income tax increase among Republicans in either the House or the Senate. We'll see what happens as things develop relative to the severance. But I think it's going to be a very interesting dance over the next 2 months while people get geared up for what this new lineup will be.
Yeah. Fred, your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that a tremendous win for the leadership in both the House and the Senate. Not only the seats that they won, but also the margin of victory. Mm-hmm. Now, the margins of victory for people like Pat Brown, Mensch, Rafferty, Tomlinson, McElhenney, they were shocking victories in what could state Senate seats, what could be considered swing districts.
Right.
I would say this is a big win for the Republican Party in the House and the Senate for this reason. They couldn't really do much when they had the 3 branches of government. Now they'll be in opposition to Wolf, and they'll be able to oppose and make minimal concessions to him in various areas.
So you think the fact that they have a Democrat in the governor's office will make them more united? I mean, basically, is that your point?
No, they will make them much stronger politically.
Much stronger politically.
And also, I would say this to the Democrats in both the House and the Senate. If there are taxes, get ready to put up a lot of votes, because the Republicans, even though they were in the leadership, will be putting up very few.
Yeah.
And
well, we'll see if they can even get them on the agenda. There's no certainty.
Well, they'll get them on the agenda.
All right, Gene. Did you? I don't know.
Let's go back to his because Fred brought up something interesting. I do want to touch briefly on the elections. We always talk about the power of the incumbency. In the House, there were 3 House Democrat incumbents that lost. That's a pretty good number. It wasn't wholesale, but there were 3 House incumbents that lost. A couple others that were pretty close out in the western part of the state. So very, very interesting election the other day.
Yeah. All right, Gene. While I have you here, let's look. The agenda. Governor-elect Wolf, you point out, wants to do a personal income tax. That's going to be a tough sell. I think we all agree. Big structural deficit. If you had to say, go through 2 or 3 things that and I think Fred and you would agree, business community pretty united about many of these things. What would your top priorities be?
Well, first off, we got to do pension. $50 billion unfunded liabilities, taking 2/3 of every new dollar that comes in. And I will say that in our view, we're not looking at any new revenue until pension is significantly reformed. And I mean significant. Other states have done it. The private sector has done it. If we don't do something about this pension issue that is devouring the new dollars coming in and devouring Pennsylvania's budget, and at the local level, it's $6 to $8 billion, mostly Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We're in a real world of financial trouble as we go down this road.
Well, Fred Anton, Governor-elect Wolf has said no to the traditional, to the hybrid plans. He wants to just wait it out and let the reforms that took place.
I'm taking Governor Wolf at his word. And Governor Wolf has said we need more revenues to provide more services to Pennsylvanians. We need more money for education, and we need more money generally. Every dollar that he can conceivably get in new revenues, either by an increase in the personal general income tax or by any sort of reasonable tax on Marcellus Shale, will be absorbed in solving the present budget problem
the
structural deficit and paying for the pensions.
Yeah.
There is no tax hike that can be high enough to give new revenues to education. There is none.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I want to talk about this education issue. Even Republicans, as both of you know, conservative Republicans, I've heard say, well, we got to do more about, education, and where all that goes is an interesting point and probably the major focus of the new administration. All right, we're talking with Gene Barr and Fred Anton. We'll be back with them in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
All right, we're back with Gene Barr and Fred Anton. All right, Gene Barr, you heard Senator Teplitz. I think I've heard many Republicans say we've got to do more with education, particularly at the school district level. There's going to be pressure to increase funding to state-related and state-owned universities, given the 11% on average cuts they've had. How are they going to increase education spending, deal with the pension problem, and not have some kind of revenue increases? How is that going to work?
Well, heard some incredible things during the campaign. That is, we're going to give more money to schools. We're going to cut your property taxes. We're going to do this. I don't know, as Fred said, how you're going to be able to do all that. Now, when we say do more for education, I'm not sure we disagree. The reality is there are lots of things we can do in terms of reforms that ought to be done. before, again, we start looking at resources.
Right.
Where those resources come from is going to be a very interesting dialogue. The other thing, we play these games with state money versus local money, and yeah, there needs to be a discussion about what's the right formula. But the last time I checked, I'm both the state taxpayer and the local taxpayer. We're talking about the same people, by and large. So let's have an honest discussion about what we're going to do here relative to money. When we look at Pennsylvania's education system, we consistently get low grades from national foundations about what we do with the money that we get. What's the return on investment, so to speak? And it's not good in Pennsylvania. And we need to do a much better job of that before we start looking at new revenue.
All right, Fred, what about over the years, you all have talked about corporate net income tax. You talked about other business taxes that they were trying to lower. I mean, they now would seem to be, and we're going to invite.
They cannot increase business taxes because there are sufficient Republican majorities in both the House and the Senate to stop them from increasing business taxes. They will not increase business taxes. That would be very, very counterproductive to the job-producing capacity of our state businesses.
You agree with that?
Oh, I do. If you increase business taxes, one or both of two things happen. One is you get less business because people tend to go elsewhere. Or two, those dollars simply get transferred down to the consumer. It becomes an indirect tax. You can tax the business, and they will find ways of passing on their additional cost of doing business, or they'll go someplace where the cost of doing business aren't as high.
All right, let me put you both on. Why not? I've been doing this for years. I'm going to put you on the spot. Look, I know the position of the business community on the shale tax. It is popular with the voters, and it's been one of, as you know, the governor-elect's major campaign arguments. As Senator Teplitz said, good chance it would get through the Senate. Fred Anton, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Gene. Is this one way to possibly raise revenue? Maybe not a 5% shale tax, but a 3 or 4% shale tax?
There will be a shale tax. It will be passed. And depending on how high the shale tax is, it will be the thing that kills the goose that laid the golden egg. Now is the wrong time for a shale tax. With the price of energy, oil at 80 or less a barrel, natural gas marginally profitable, sure there will be the same wells in Pennsylvania. This may very well affect the pipeline developments. This may well affect 3 plants that are being built in Pennsylvania.
We have about 45 seconds left. We'll pass.
Look, it's going to be up there. There'll be serious discussions about that. The reality is we have what functions as a shale tax now. It's called an impact fee. Those dollars go back to the local community. When we look at this, there's going to have to be a decision made. What's the total burden going to be? We have a corporate net income tax rate of 9.99. We have a current impact fee that delivers $230 million. What else are we going to put on them?
Gene gets the last word. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.